The habit of speaking apologetically of yourself as being old merely because you have reached the age of 40 or 50, instead of reversing the rule and expressing gratitude for having reached the age of wisdom and understanding. 3. Inappropriate dress and action. Trying to appear much younger than your age by going overboard in your attempt to keep up with the style and mannerisms of youth. The sixth basic fear. The fear of death. To some, this is the cruelest of all the basic fears. The reason is obvious. The terrible pangs of fear associated with the thought of death, in the majority of cases, may be charged to religious fanaticism. So-called heathens are less afraid of death than the more civilized. For hundreds of millions of years we have been asking the still unanswered questions, where did I come from? And where am I going? During the darker ages of the past, the more cunning and crafty were not slow to offer the answer to these questions for a price. Come into my tent, embrace my faith, accept my dogmas, and I will give you a ticket that will admit you straight into heaven when you die, says the religious leader. Remain out of my tent, says the same leader, and the devil will take you and burn you throughout eternity. The thought of eternal punishment destroys interest in life and makes happiness impossible. While the religious leader may not actually be able to provide safe conduct into heaven or send you to hell, the possibility of the latter seems terrible. The very thought of it takes hold of the imagination in such a realistic way that it paralyzes reason and sets up the fear of death. The fear of death is not as common now as it was during the age when there were no great colleges and universities. People of science have turned the spotlight of truth upon the world, and this truth is rapidly freeing men and women from this terrible fear of death. The young men and women who attend the colleges and universities are not easily impressed by fire and brimstone. Through knowledge, the fears of the dark ages that grip the mind have been dispelled. The entire world is made up of only four things: time, space, energy, and matter. In elementary physics, we learn that neither matter nor energy can be created or destroyed. Both matter and energy can be transformed, but neither can be destroyed. Life is energy, if it is anything. If neither energy nor matter can be destroyed, of course life itself cannot be destroyed. Life, like other forms of energy, may be passed through various processes of transition or change, but it cannot be destroyed. Death is mere transition. And if death is not mere change or transition, then nothing comes after death except a long, eternal, peaceful sleep. And sleep is nothing to be feared. If you can accept the logic of this, you may forever wipe out your fear of death. Symptoms of the fear of death. The general symptoms of this fear are: 1. The habit of thinking about dying instead of making the most of life. This is generally due to lack of purpose or lack of a suitable occupation. This fear is more prevalent among the aged, but sometimes the more youthful are victims of it. The greatest of all remedies for the fear of death is a burning desire for achievement, backed by useful service to others. A busy person seldom has time to think about dying. A busy person finds life too thrilling to worry about death. 2. Sometimes the fear of death is closely associated with the fear of poverty, where death would leave loved ones poverty-stricken. 3. In other cases, the fear of death is caused by illness and the breakdown of physical body resistance. 4. The most common causes of the fear of death are ill health, poverty, lack of appropriate occupation, disappointment over love, insanity, and religious fanaticism. The disaster of worry and destructive thinking. Worry is a state of mind based upon fear. It works slowly but persistently. It is insidious and subtle. Step by step, it digs itself in until it paralyzes the reasoning faculty and destroys self-confidence and initiative. Worry is a form of sustained fear caused by indecision. Therefore, it is a state of mind that can be controlled. An unsettled mind is helpless. Indecision makes an unsettled mind. Most individuals lack the willpower to reach decisions promptly and to stand by them after they have been made. We do not worry over conditions once we have reached a decision to follow a definite line of action. I once interviewed a man who was sentenced to be electrocuted 2 hours later. The condemned man was the calmest of the 8 men who were in the death cell with him. His calmness prompted me to ask him how it felt to know that he was going into eternity in a short while. With a smile of confidence on his face, he said, "It feels fine. Just think, brother, my troubles will soon be over. I've had nothing but trouble all my life. It has been a hardship to get food and clothing. Soon, I will not need these things. I have felt fine ever since I learned for certain that I must die. I made up my mind then to accept my fate in good spirit." As he spoke, he devoured a dinner sufficient for 3 men, eating every mouthful of the food brought to him, and apparently enjoying it as much as if no disaster awaited him. Decision gave this man resignation to his fate. Decision can also prevent one's acceptance of undesired circumstances. Through indecision, the 6 basic fears become translated into a state of worry. Relieve yourself forever of the fear of death by reaching a decision to accept death as an inescapable event. Eliminate the fear of old age by reaching a decision to accept it not as a handicap, but as a great blessing that carries with it wisdom, self-control, and understanding. Master the fear of loss of love by reaching a decision to get along without love, if that is necessary. Defeat the fear of criticism by reaching a decision not to worry about what other people think, do, or say. Overcome the fear of ill health by the decision to forget symptoms, and whip the fear of poverty by reaching a decision to get along with whatever wealth you can accumulate without worry. Kill the habit of worry in all its forms by reaching a general blanket decision that nothing life has to offer is worth the price of worry. With this decision will come poise, peace of mind, and calmness of thought, which will bring happiness. If your mind is filled with fear, you not only destroy your own chances of intelligent action, but you transmit these destructive vibrations to the minds of all who come into contact with you, and you destroy their chances too. Even a dog or a horse knows when its master lacks courage. It will pick up the vibrations of fear given off by its master and behave accordingly. The vibrations of fear pass from one mind to another just as quickly and as surely as the sound of the human voice passes from the broadcasting station to a radio receiver. The person who constantly speaks of negative or destructive thoughts is practically certain to experience the results of those words in the form of destructive feedback. But even negative thoughts without words will come back to you. The release of destructive thought impulses alone also produces feedback in more ways than one. First, and perhaps most important to be remembered, the person who releases thoughts of a destructive nature must suffer damage through the breaking down of creative imagination. Secondly, the presence in the mind of any destructive emotion develops a negative personality, which repels people and often converts them into antagonists. The third source of damage is that negative thoughts not only affect others, but they also embed themselves in the subconscious mind of the person releasing them and there become a part of that person's character. Your business in life is to achieve success. To be successful, you must find peace of mind, acquire the material needs of life, and above all, attain happiness. All of these indications of success begin in the form of thought impulses. You control your own mind. You have the power to feed it whatever thought impulses you choose. With this goes the responsibility of using your mind constructively. You are the master of your own earthly destiny, just as surely as you have the power to control your own thoughts. You may influence, direct, and eventually control your own environment, making your life what you want it to be. Or you may neglect to make your life what you want, and you will be adrift on the seas of circumstance, where you will be tossed like a wood chip on the waves of the ocean. The Devil's Workshop. In addition to the 6 basic fears, there is another evil by which people suffer. It constitutes a rich soil in which the seeds of failure grow abundantly. It is so subtle that its presence often is not detected. It is more deeply rooted and more often fatal than all of the 6 fears. For want of a better name, let us call this evil susceptibility to negative influences. Those who accumulate great riches always protect themselves against negative influences. The poverty-stricken never do. Those who succeed in any calling must prepare their minds to resist such influences. If you are reading this book to learn how to grow rich, you should examine yourself very carefully to determine whether you are susceptible to negative influences. If you neglect this self-analysis, you will give up your right to attain the object of your desires. Make your analysis searching. As you read the following questions, be tough on yourself. Go at the task as carefully as you would if you were searching for any other enemy you knew was waiting to ambush you. You must deal with your own faults as you would with a real and serious enemy. You can easily protect yourself against real enemies because there are laws, police, and courts to deal with them. But this 7th basic evil is more difficult to master because it strikes when you are not aware of its presence, when you are asleep and while you are awake. Moreover, its weapon is intangible because it consists of merely a state of mind. Negative influences are also dangerous because they come in so many different forms. Sometimes they enter the mind through the well-meant words of your friends and relatives. At other times they come from within, through your own mental attitude. Always, it is as deadly as poison, even though it may not kill as quickly. How to protect yourself against negative influences. To protect yourself against negative influences, whether of your own making or the result of negative people around you, recognize that your willpower is your defense. You must put it into constant use until it builds a wall of immunity against negative influences in your own mind. Recognize that you and every other human being are, by nature, lazy, indifferent, and susceptible to all suggestions that reinforce your weaknesses. Recognize that you are, by nature, susceptible to all of the 6 basic fears, and you must set up habits to counteract all these fears. Recognize that negative influences often work on you through your subconscious mind and are therefore difficult to detect. Keep your mind closed against all people who depress or discourage you in any way. Clean out your medicine chest and stop pandering to colds, aches, pains, and imaginary illness. Deliberately seek the company of people who influence you to think and act for yourself. Do not expect troubles, as they have a tendency not to disappoint. Without doubt, the most common weakness of all human beings is the habit of leaving their minds open to the negative influences of other people. This weakness is all the more damaging because most people do not even know they do it. The following list of questions is designed to help you see yourself as you really are. You should read through the list now. Then set aside a day when you can give adequate time to go through the list again and thoroughly answer each question. When you do this, I advise that you read the questions and state your answers aloud so you can hear your own voice. This will make it easier for you to be truthful with yourself. Self-analysis questions. Do you complain often of feeling bad? And if so, what is the cause? Do you find fault with other people at the slightest provocation? Do you frequently make mistakes in your work, and if so, why? Are you sarcastic and offensive in your conversation? Do you deliberately avoid the association of anyone, and if so, why? Do you suffer frequently with indigestion? If so, what is the cause? Does life seem futile and the future hopeless to you? Do you like your occupation? If not, why? Do you often feel self-pity? And if so, why? Are you envious of those who excel you? To which do you devote most time, thinking of success or of failure? Are you gaining or losing self-confidence as you grow older? Do you learn something of value from all mistakes? Are you permitting some relative or acquaintance to worry you? If so, why? Are you sometimes excited about life and at other times in the depths of despondency? Who has the most inspiring influence upon you, and for what reason? Do you tolerate negative or discouraging influences that you could avoid? Are you careless of your personal appearance? If so, when and why? Have you learned how to ignore your troubles by being too busy to be annoyed by them? Would you call yourself a spineless weakling if you permitted others to do your thinking for you? How many preventable disturbances annoy you, and why do you tolerate them? Do you resort to alcohol, drugs, cigarettes, or other compulsions to quiet your nerves? If so, why do you not try willpower instead? Does anyone nag you? And if so, for what reason? Do you have a definite major purpose? And if so, what is it, and what plan do you have for achieving it? Do you suffer from any of the 6 basic fears? If so, which ones? Have you developed a method to shield yourself against the negative influence of others? Do you use autosuggestion to make your mind positive? Which do you value most, your material possessions or your privilege of controlling your own thoughts? Are you easily influenced by others against your own judgment? Has today added anything of value to your stock of knowledge or state of mind? Do you face squarely the circumstances that make you unhappy, or do you sidestep the responsibility? Do you analyze all mistakes and failures and try to profit by them, or do you take the attitude that this is not your duty? Can you name 3 of your most damaging weaknesses? What are you doing to correct them? Do you encourage other people to bring their worries to you for sympathy? Do you choose from your daily experiences lessons or influences that aid in your personal advancement? Does your presence have a negative influence on other people as a rule? What habits of other people annoy you most? Do you form your own opinions, or do you permit yourself to be influenced by other people? Have you learned how to create a mental state of mind with which you can shield yourself against all discouraging influences? Does your occupation inspire you with faith and hope? Are you conscious of possessing spiritual forces of sufficient power to enable you to keep your mind free from all forms of fear? Does your religion help to keep your mind positive? Do you feel it your duty to share other people's worries? If so, why? If you believe that birds of a feather flock together, what have you learned about yourself by studying the friends whom you attract? What connection, if any, do you see between the people with whom you associate most closely and any unhappiness you may experience? Could it be possible that some person whom you consider to be a friend is, in reality, your worst enemy because of his or her negative influence on your mind? By what rules do you judge who is helpful and who is damaging to you? Are your intimate associates mentally superior or inferior to you? How much time out of every 24 hours do you devote to your occupation, sleep, play and relaxation, acquiring useful knowledge, plain wasted time? Who among your acquaintances encourages you most, cautions you most, discourages you most? What is your greatest worry? Why do you tolerate it? When others offer you free, unsolicited advice, do you accept it without question, or do you analyze their motive? What, above all else, do you most desire? Do you intend to acquire it? Are you willing to subordinate all other desires for this one? How much time daily do you devote to acquiring it? Do you change your mind often? If so, why? Do you usually finish everything you begin? Are you easily impressed by other people's business or professional titles, college degrees, or wealth? Are you easily influenced by what other people think or say about you? Do you cater to people because of their social or financial status? Whom do you believe to be the greatest person living? In what respect is this person superior to yourself? How much time have you devoted to studying and answering these questions? At least one day is necessary for the analysis and the answering of the entire list. If you have answered all these questions truthfully, you know more about yourself than the majority of people. Study the questions carefully. Come back to them once each week for several months, and be astounded at the amount of additional knowledge of great value to yourself you will have gained by the simple method of answering the questions truthfully. If you are not certain about the answers to some of the questions, seek the counsel of those who know you well, especially those who have no motive in flattering you, and see yourself through their eyes. The experience will be astonishing. The one thing over which you have absolute control. You have absolute control over only one thing, and that is your thoughts. This is the most significant and inspiring of all facts known to humans. It reflects our divine nature. This ability to control your thoughts is the sole means by which you may control your own destiny. If you fail to control your own mind, you may be sure you will control nothing else. Your mind is your spiritual estate. Protect and use it with the care to which divine royalty is entitled. You were given your willpower for this purpose. Unfortunately, there is no legal protection against those who, by design or through ignorance, poison the minds of others with negative suggestion. Those with negative minds tried to convince Thomas A. Edison that he could not build a machine that would record and reproduce the human voice, because, they said, no one else has ever produced such a machine. Edison did not believe them. He knew that the mind could produce anything the mind could conceive and believe. That knowledge was the thing that lifted the great Edison above the common herd. Men with negative minds told F.W. Woolworth he would go broke trying to run a store on 5 and 10 cent sales. He did not believe them. He knew that he could do anything within reason if he backed his plans with faith. Exercising his right to keep the negative suggestions of others out of his mind, he piled up a fortune of more than $100 million. Doubting Thomases scoffed scornfully when Henry Ford tried out his first crudely built automobile on the streets of Detroit. Some said the thing would never become practical. Others said no one would pay money for such a contraption. Ford said, "I'll belt the earth with dependable motor cars." And he did. For the benefit of those seeking vast riches, let it be remembered that practically the sole difference between Henry Ford and a majority of workers is this: Ford had a mind, and he controlled it. The others have minds that they do not try to control. Mind control is the result of self-discipline and habit. You either control your mind or it controls you. There is no halfway compromise. The most practical method for controlling your mind is the habit of keeping it busy with a definite purpose backed by a definite plan. Study the records of those who achieve noteworthy success, and you will see that they have control over their own minds, and that they exercise that control and direct it toward the attainment of definite objectives. Without this control, success is not possible. 55 Famous Alibis by Old Man If. People who do not succeed have one distinguishing trait in common. They know all the reasons for failure and have what they believe to be airtight alibis to explain away their own lack of achievement. Some of these alibis are clever, and a few of them are justifiable by the facts. But alibis cannot be used for money. The world wants to know only one thing. Have you achieved success? A character analyst compiled a list of the most commonly used alibis. As you read the list, examine yourself carefully and determine how many of these alibis you use. Remember, the philosophy presented in this book makes every one of these alibis obsolete. If I didn't have a wife and family. If I had enough pull. If I had money. If I had a good education. If I could get a job. If I had good health. If I only had time. If times were better. If other people understood me. If conditions around me were only different. If I could live my life over again. If I did not fear what they would say. If I had been given a chance. If I now had a chance. If other people didn't have it in for me. If nothing happens to stop me. If only I were younger. If I only could do what I want. If I had been born rich. If I could meet the right people. If I had the talent that some people have. If I dared to assert myself. If only I had embraced past opportunities. If people didn't get on my nerves. If I didn't have to keep house and look after the children. If I could save some money. If the boss only appreciated me. If I only had somebody to help me. If my family understood me. If I lived in a big city. If I could just get started. If I were only free. If I had the personality of some people. If I were not so fat. If my real talents were known. If I could just get a break. If I could only get out of debt. If I hadn't failed. If I only knew how. If everybody wasn't against me. If I didn't have so many worries. If I could marry the right person. If people weren't so dumb. If my family were not so extravagant. If I were sure of myself. If luck were not against me. If I had not been born under the wrong star. If it were not true that what is to be will be. If I did not have to work so hard. If I hadn't lost my money. If I lived in a different neighborhood. If I didn't have a past. If I only had a business of my own. If other people would only listen to me. If, and this is the greatest of them all, if I had the courage to see myself as I really am, I would find out what is wrong with me and correct it. And I know that something must be wrong with the way I have done things, or I would already have the success that I desire. I recognize that something must be wrong with me, otherwise I would have spent more time analyzing my weaknesses and less time building alibis to cover them. Building alibis to explain away failure is a national pastime. The habit is as old as the human race and is fatal to success. Why do people cling to their pet alibis? The answer is obvious. They defend their alibis Because they create them. Your alibi is the child of your own imagination. It is human nature to defend your own brainchild. Building alibis is a deeply rooted habit. Habits are difficult to break, especially when they provide justification for something we do. Plato had this truth in mind when he said, "The first and best victory is to conquer self. To be conquered by self is, of all things, the most shameful and vile." Another philosopher had the same thought in mind when he said, "It was a great surprise to me when I discovered that most of the ugliness I saw in others was but a reflection of my own nature." Elbert Hubbard, philosopher, author, publisher of the Fra magazine, and founder of the Roy Crofters Community of Artists, said, "It has always been a mystery to me why people spend so much time deliberately fooling themselves by creating alibis to cover their weaknesses. If used differently, this same time would be sufficient to cure the weakness. Then no alibis would be needed." In parting, I would remind you that life is a checkerboard, and the player opposite you is time. If you hesitate before moving, or neglect to move promptly, your men will be wiped off the board by time. You are playing against a partner who will not tolerate indecision. Previously, you may have had a logical excuse for not having forced life to come through with whatever you asked. That alibi is now obsolete, because you are in possession of the master key that unlocks the door to life's riches. The master key is intangible, but it is powerful. It is the privilege of creating, in your own mind, a burning desire for a definite form of riches. There is no penalty for the use of this key, but there is a price you must pay if you do not use it. The price is failure. There is a reward of stupendous proportions if you put the key to use. It is the satisfaction that will come to you when you conquer self and force life to pay whatever is asked. The reward is worthy of your effort. Will you make the start and be convinced? "If we are related," said the immortal Emerson, "we shall meet." In closing, may I borrow his thought and say, if we are related, we have, through these pages, met. Remember that your real wealth can be measured not by what you have, but by what you are.
Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Here's some intriguing facts about it. Originally, the book was published in 1937, and surprisingly, by the latest record in 2015, Think and Grow Rich has sold over 100 million copies worldwide. How this book was created is quite fascinating. It was created by a man named Napoleon Hill, who interviewed and studied the habits of more than 500 of the richest men and women, many of them who started life in poverty, with little education or influence. It took Hill over 20 years to compile all the knowledge and wisdom from these interviews into a book containing 13 main principles of how anyone can change his or her way of thinking and become rich. So, without further delay, let's begin. Hill demonstrates the power of thoughts and how it has the power to shape your life, and in this chapter, it sets itself as the foundation of the book. One of the greatest strengths of this book that I've always appreciated was how Hill used real life stories with the lessons. Let's take a look how the power of thought comes into play. There's a story about a man named Darby who became one of the most successful insurance salesmen in the country, and he used to share a powerful life experience he had with the gold rush back when it was booming. He went there with his uncle, and after weeks of labor, they suddenly struck gold in the midst of their mining. In the beginning, things looked great. It was so successful they brought a drill, and then afterwards something unexpected happened. There seemed to be no more gold left as they continued to mine further into the ground, and they continued to drill on, desperately trying to pick up any gold, but unfortunately there was no sign of it. At the end, they finally decided there was no use of trying to mine anymore, and so they quit. They sold the machinery to a junk man for a few $100s and took the train back home. But here's where the story gets interesting. The junk man who bought the machinery called in a mining engineer to look at the mine and do a little investigation. An astonishing discovery was made by the hired engineer that the project had failed because the owners were not familiar with fault lines. And even more surprising was his calculations showed that the gold would be found just 3 feet away from where Darby's had stopped drilling. And that is exactly where they found all the hidden abundance of gold. The junk man took millions of dollars of gold in from the mine, all because he knew well enough to seek expert counsel before giving up. Now, let's observe what happened from this story. Napoleon Hill points out that Darby and his uncle thought there was no gold left, so they thought there was no use to continue on and gave up. On the other hand, the junk man thought about not giving up on the abandoned project, went the extra miles, and at the end reaped success. Hill demonstrates success comes to those who are success conscious. One of the common causes of failure is the habit of quitting when one is overtaken by temporary defeat. In fact, one of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average person's familiarity to the word impossible. To add to this lesson, the 21st Century Revised Version of Think and Grow Rich provides a modern example about Steven Spielberg, one of the all-time greatest motion pictures directors. There's a funny story in the movie industry how Steven actually broke into Universal Studio. Before he was famous or anything, Steven took a Universal Studios tour, which enables visitors to take a good look inside at the movie business. Steven somehow snuck off from the tour group and hid until the tour ended. When he left, at the end of the day, he said a few friendly words to the gate guard. Afterwards, day after day, he went back into the studio for 3 months. He walked past the guards, they waved at him, and he waved back. What's funny is he always wore a suit and carried a briefcase, letting the guards assume he was one of the students with a summer job in the studio. He got to the point of becoming friends with the directors, writers, and editors. He even got to become friends with the head of the production of Universal Studios' television arm, and one day he got to show the director his college film project, which impressed him so much that he placed Steven under contract with the studio. Over the next few years, Steven directed several movies, including the popular Indiana Jones series, Jaws, and later directed Jurassic Park, which became a hit at the time as one of the most successful movies in history. And what we just saw with Steven Spielberg becoming a movie director dominated his thoughts so much that he went beyond what others would do, sneaking into guarded buildings to get the chance to become friends with the directors. Remember this lesson. In order to achieve something great, your thoughts have a great effect on your actions and habits, which ultimately has an effect on your outcome. This is why it's important to change our minds from failure consciousness to success consciousness. So before we continue to the next chapters, question for you. Assuming wealth is what you want to accomplish, are you determined enough and willing to try harder to achieve it, no matter what and how many times you'll face adversities? Think about that. A long time ago, a great warrior had to make a decision which ensured his success on the battlefield. He was about to send his armies against a powerful foe whose men outnumbered his own. He loaded his soldiers into boats, sailed to the enemy's country, unloaded the soldiers and equipment, and then gave the order to burn the ships. Addressing his men before the first battle, he said, "You see the boats going in smoke. That means we cannot leave these shores alive unless we win. We now have no choice. We win or we perish." At the end of it all, they won. Now, why did I tell you this story? It's because every person who wants to win in anything must be willing to burn his ships and cut all sources of retreat. Only then you'll be sure of maintaining the state of mind which is essential to success, known as a burning desire. Now, last time we learned about the importance of thoughts, which deeply ties with today's lesson of Napoleon Hill's first step to riches, which is desire, the starting point of all achievements. You're going to want to pay close attention to what's coming next because reality is everyone wishes for money, but Napoleon Hill states that wishing alone will not bring money. That's just wishful thinking, unless you have a true burning desire. Without desire, there will be no motivation or cause for action. Having a burning desire will produce a greater chance for yourself to create wealth because with that state of mind, like the great warrior who ordered to burn the ships, winning the battle became an obsession. When you reach that state of mind, you begin planning on definite ways and means to acquire riches, backing those plans with persistence. Here's 6 practical steps from this chapter that Hill puts together that was approved by Andrew Carnegie and Thomas Edison for directing your desire into reality. Step number 1. Fix your mind on the exact amount of money you desire. Step 2. Determine exactly what you intend to give in return for the money. Step 3. Establish a date you want to have it achieved. Step number 4. Create a definite plan for carrying out your desire and put it into action. Step number 5. Write out the exact amount of money you intend to acquire and what you're willing to give in return for it. And finally, step number 6. Read out your statement out loud twice daily. As you read, see, feel, and believe yourself in possession of the money. Remember, for true success, desire is crucial because wishful thinking will result in frustration. And it is this desire that catapults you into action that brings results. Desire pushes you out of your comfort zone because when you desire something, you will not sit idly without doing everything possible to attain the object of your desire. I want to finish off this chapter with an incredible true story that happened with Napoleon Hill's second son, Blair Hill. Blair was born with no ears, and the doctor said to Napoleon that the child might be deaf and mute for the rest of his life. Despite what the doctors told him, Napoleon's reaction was a silent vow deep in his heart to find a way for Blair to one day be able to hear and to speak. He thought of the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson as, quote, "The whole course of things goes to teach us faith. We need only obey. There is guidance for each of us, and by lowly listening, we should hear the right word." So, what was that right word? Napoleon said his word was desire. More than anything, he wanted his son to be able to hear and to speak, and he was incredibly determined to transplant that burning desire into his own son as he grew up. One of the greatest things Napoleon did was creating bedtime stories for Blair with themes designed to develop in him self-reliance, imagination, and a keen desire to hear and to be normal, as well as to establish the belief that his affliction was not a liability, but an asset of great value. Blair progressed through the grades despite having poor hearing and went out to pursue advanced education at the University of West Virginia. And one day he got the chance to try hearing aids, but he never found a device that worked for him. He didn't give up. His desire was still in him. So later, in his last year of college, he got to try out a different hearing aid, which was specifically designed for him by another hearing aid company. The hearing aid proved to be absolutely perfect for Blair. He was so excited, he immediately telephoned his mother, and he was overjoyed to hear her voice perfectly. This was the most important turning point in Blair's life, and for his and Napoleon's dream of normal hearing and speech was now fulfilled. This burning desire is what eventually led Blair in bringing hope and a practical relief to thousands of deafened people and expanding the hearing aid company. This forever changes limitation into a priceless asset of value, not just for himself, but to multitudes around the world. What Blair learned from his father always stayed with him, and that lesson was every adversity brings with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. Remember, in anything you want to do, desire is the starting point of all achievements. Just imagine yourself, dressed up sharp, standing before one of the biggest, most powerful, influential investors in the world, and you begin to feel your heart rate climbing. The environment around you feels like it's slowing down, but you take a deep breath and you try your best to look calm and collected, dialed in, 100% focused on the man in front of you. You begin to think to yourself, this is it. This is the moment I've been waiting for. You know that the presentation of your business idea that you've created has the potential to bring value to yourself and many generations ahead. And you're standing there before one man, hoping he'll be interested enough in partnering with you. Now, just before you do anything, a thought appears in your head. Some call it doubt, some call it uncertainty. It starts to question you. Do you really think you have absolute belief that you could achieve this? Great. Now what? That was a heavy blow to your self-confidence. As you imagined this, you might have felt like you were in the show Shark Tank, but this actually happened in the year 1900, based on a true story of Charles M. Schwab meeting J.P. Morgan. What's awesome about this story is Charles M. Schwab successfully uses the second principle of Think and Grow Rich. Let's take a look and see what happened. Hey there, welcome to the second step to riches of the 13 Steps to Riches series, where today we'll be diving into chapter 3 of Think and Grow Rich. We'll get back right away to Charles' exciting story, which you get to learn how he used the second step to riches that dramatically impacted the advancement of the United States into what it is today. It surely wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this important principle. So then, what is the second step to riches? It's actually called faith. Why, according to Napoleon Hill, of having faith so vital and so important to be part of one of the steps to riches? In the previous video, we learned about having a burning desire as one of the steps to riches. For a burning desire to come true, you must have faith that it is possible and that it will come true. Napoleon said, when you truly have faith in a desire and believe it will come true, it starts manifesting in its own physical self. If you really define the word faith, it means having complete trust or confidence in someone or something. It's absolutely essential to have confidence in something that you're actually doing to reach your goal, especially during hard time, because other times losing confidence will make you quit, and that's game over. That's why it's important to know how to practice positive visualization, which is shown in one of the famous quotes from Napoleon Hill that it's from this chapter as, quote, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Here's a simple example of that. When someone sees himself in a negative way and communicates negative beliefs to his subconscious mind, he will end up living a negative life. On the other hand, someone who is positive always sees himself as successful and visualizes his desire being fulfilled will have a greater chance of eventually reaching success and a wealthy life. Okay, now let's get back and see how this principle worked for Charles M. Schwab that led to the formation of United States Steel Corporation in the early 1900s. Schwab had developed an idea based on interactions of various competing steel mills to unite them all under a trust of one unified corporate structure. To make this opportunity work correctly, there needed to be a massive influx of capital investment and a unification of all the other steel mills, and he became focused on one man that has the power and capital to help him create this. His name is J.P. Morgan. Keep in mind, there were many others who came before this man with their business ideas, but he would just ignore them. But Schwab was able to take this idea, have faith, aka complete trust or confidence in his idea, and present this idea to J.P. Morgan. His ultimate faith in his idea and in himself marveled J.P. Morgan. From this, the United States Steel Corporation was born. It later became one of the largest steel producers and largest corporations in the world, and Schwab rose to a position of power, fame, and riches. So, if you find it is hard for you to have faith, the answer revolves around the third step to riches using an effective technique which will be in the next chapter. Again, remember this, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Hill believes if you want to achieve whatever you want in life, you must first see it in your mind and then absolutely believe in it. Whether you believe you can or you cannot, you are right. Did you know the subconscious mind is like a giant file library of all your memories? In fact, this is the place where all your choices are determined on how you respond to life and how you make important decisions. Strong emotions such as fears, desires, and urges all stem from the subconscious mind, which largely affects how you see the world and your place in it. If you compare the power of your conscious mind to your subconscious mind, your consciousness is extremely limited compared to your subconsciousness. The conscious mind is only a small fraction of your mental capacity that governs your awareness through the 5 main senses such as sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. The subconscious mind is where all the majority of your total mental capacity is used for registering everything behind the scene. And this is where the magic happens. Take a look at this. The brain is incredibly complex. It's consisting of about 100 billion neurons, making on the order of 100 trillion connections. It's incredible to know how your subconscious mind is always on autopilot even when you're asleep. It's constantly maintaining your physical body, such as your organs, and your natural or learned tendencies for better or worse. Now, why is this all important? In the previous video, we went over an important principle of Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill called fate. There's a very strong reason why sometimes we do not believe in achieving our own wishes, despite even though we want something, we do not believe we deserve it. In other words, we lack faith in achieving our goals. Well, in this chapter of Think and Grow Rich, according to Napoleon Hill, what you need to learn next will help you increase your belief and help you train your subconscious mind to attain the success you want. How do we really do that? It's by applying the third principle of Think and Grow Rich called autosuggestion. You see, autosuggestion is an effective technique shared by multitudes of wealthy individuals that Napoleon Hill interviewed during his 20-year journey. Interesting, right? Well then, how does this principle work? You see, as we talked about, your life is experienced mainly through your 5 senses, which is sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Hill says that all these 5 main senses contribute to the formation of new thoughts, which later gets processed and filtered by your consciousness before it enters into your subconscious. The conscious mind serves as an outer guard filter which either lets your thoughts pass or be rejected before entering in your subconscious mind. Once the thought reaches into the subconscious mind, it gets planted like a seed and cultivates over time, ultimately influencing your behavior, emotions, and future actions. Napoleon Hill notes that in order for thoughts to make it into the subconscious mind, it must be mixed with emotions or feelings. The reason being is your subconscious mind only recognizes and acts only upon thoughts that have been well mixed with emotions or feelings. Here's an example of that. Just imagine you are a thought bubble, waiting outside in a single file line with the other